Mark and
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is the check-in for Foundations Q&A, Sunday, October 29th, 2023. So I want to start with this one. This one has to do with, this is an exercise in coachability. And it's it's asking us to look at 12 different trade-off decisions. It's a forced choice kind of a quiz. I'm going to use this in a couple of different ways. One of them is for self-reflection, and with all self-reporting instruments, where it says, "Hey, put yourself in a certain frame of mind, and then take a position." And what does it say? Now, there's a lot of instruments out there from psychologists. Self-reporting uh, has limits on utility. It has some. It is much more useful as a mirror, to be understood as a mirror, as a point of departure. As you're looking at what you said, and in many cases, it's built on some kind of model, that allows you to interpret on the basis of, hey, a lot of people have taken this and a lot of people have talked about it, and these are the insights that come from that. So if maybe I was this one, hey, what does that say? The danger of these things is that you infer more explanatory power and predictability than is justified. You see that a lot in things like Myers Briggs. There have been efforts over the decades to lend it the aura of scientific reliability and validity. It's my personal opinion is that that's kind of, it's mostly bullshit in the sense of like the like physics and electricity and circuit boards and mechanical engineering. It's not really that. However, the value of it as a self-reflective tool is undeniable. And because I believe a lot of our self concepts and the way we behave in groups with purposeful activity is influenced by who we think we are and who we think the other person is, it actually serves a powerful view of who we think we are and what we're saying. And in that sense, in the true story sense, it has some utility. As long as we remember that it's a mirror that we are holding up and that we are making sense, it's our reaction to what we see turns out to be where the value in it really is, as opposed to believing that, the model itself. You can see where you are sort of in a population of people, but the real important value is in what it helps you uncover. One of the powerful tools that are available to us is called the Johari window. And the Johari window is an exercise that lets you think about yourself and others and how you see each other. It's like a 2 by 2. If I'll get this right, it's something like in this square here, in square one, it's who's doing the thinking and who is being viewed or making sense. In the first one, I think about, what do I think about me in my private space? So it has to do with my identity. So I might write something in there. There is this one, which is how do I think, in group square two? How do I think others see me. And that's me projecting onto you as if I could read your mind. What do I think they think about me based on what I presented? So if we say something like, this comes from thick face black heart theory of China, there's sort of like an inside and an outside face. So first square is like, this is myself, this is the other. Inside this little category, it's like what I think about me, my inner dialogue, my inner identity. And then I make choices about how I interact with you in the public space. What I what I'm sending, what I think I'm sending, what I'm trying to project. So if the inner me looks at the outer me and considers what it is that I'm sending, I think that that creates some kind of impression on your inner space. And this is what you think about me on the inside. Now, the only way that I know or I can know about what you think about me on your inside is a combination of what I think I'm sending and then what you are displaying with your outer face. You know, in other words, you give me feedback. On the basis of those two things, I'm trying to come up with some composite statement about what I think you think about me. And that also then shapes what I think about you as I create a pseudo identity, some kind of representation of you in my head as an audience member, as a fellow human, what I think you are and how I think you're going to respond if I act in a certain way. And consciously and unconsciously, that shapes how I present information in order to influence you for behavior. You can see how this goes around and around and around and around. In thick face black heart theory, the Chinese philosopher Li says, or it might be scholar Lu, he says, we got some kind of true inner person that we may or may not know, and then around that we construct layers and layers of personalities, personas, representations, and that in the public space we're always trying to infer what is that guy's intention towards me, and what can I do to act upon him in such a way that he behaves in a certain way, that he goes towards A rather than B because of my own checklist of what's good and bad. And so there's influence going on in there. And so if you read the traditional Chinese philosophy on thick face black heart, what it said, the term black heart refers to this carefully hidden true internal dispositions, purposes, intentions, and that in the warlord area, people were seen as deceitful and devious, and so you had better protect yourself and your family and your village and your province and your nation against all the people who were over here who you had better assume were coming at you with evil intent, because that was the lesson that had been learned over thousands of years of written history and living and decades of living life. And so these layers of this onion skin were different techniques that you could employ to show them something that would cause them to behave in the desired way. Well, if the other guy knows that, now suddenly what you have to contend with is a world in which you can't trust anything that you see or anything that they say until you have some actual evidence that begins to allow you to reveal what it is. So thick face was the idea that you had these layers and layers and layers of protection. And the idea of black heart was that you were going to try to do things that could penetrate,
Hey,
yeah, could penetrate to what
spoke
they
to me
actually were.
about, I sent you my contact card.
So,
I'm on the foundation's call.
oh, okay,
Oops.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. No. So this idea was that you go back and forth trying to penetrate to their black heart while protecting your black heart. And so scholar Lou, I think, if I remember, it's either Lou or Lee, wrote about that extensively as part of the of his work into human nature and politics, and he ended up being an advisor to, well, the guy who was one of his greatest students was a fellow named Mao Zedong, who turned out to be pretty effective in a world of cutthroat warlords. Well, if you think about how this applies in your own life, you say, how do you let's just suppose that we're going to have a meeting and there's you and there's everybody else going into that meeting, and you say to yourself, as they sit around the meeting and we're there for some, I have some kind of purpose, and intent and outcomes that I want to achieve. This is connected to trading in a deep way, guys. Don't worry about it. We'll get there. What percentage of your time in meetings is spent trying to figure out who all these guys really are and what their purposes really are, and how are they lying, cheating, and deceiving to try to get me? What is their hidden agenda? When I talk with senior leaders in the Army, when I've conducted research on that, and with business executives and just humans going to generic meetings in their life, 90 to 95% of their time, if they're in any kind of position of power, authority, or whatever, they spend 90 to 95% of their time trying to detect what the other guy's really about, what he's trying to do. The whole idea of true storytelling, by the way, is to say, what would it be like if you could go to meetings in which you had 90 to 95% assurance that everything those guys were saying was the best truth that they could possibly tell about the important stories that they are rendering, and that their intention is that the people may thrive? If you could go into a meeting and everything that you were about to hear was, you were damn sure had everything to do with truthful reporting of what their life was like, and so that you could rely upon that in an important way. How could what does it take to build the evidence of that? It turns out that the evidence is because those guys are revealing vulnerabilities about themselves that of the kind that you wouldn't ordinarily hear, and it leads you to believe that that's true, and it resonates, and there's no ulterior motive. You can't, how in the world could, anyway, the whole idea behind true storytelling is to start with that position so that we can see where our stories collectively go. Now, we still have to go forth and be responsible for the results that we get for the actions that we take in the world. But one of the things that you get in our social groups is if you want to work in the truth, what I have been finding is that first You have to have the trust. You decide to invest trust in what it is that you're about to hear and maybe act on. And that we give trust carefully because we've learned in the past from life that when you speak the unfiltered truth in public, the consequences of that to you in your immediate life are not always pleasant. And so before you begin investing in trust, you start thinking about, well, how do I protect against risk of the truth that I'm about to invest, and the consequences of telling the truth. And then when I, even more profoundly, when I hear what a guy proposes is the truth, how do I act on that in a way that protects those who are relying on me to protect them? And even if they don't know that I'm protecting them, I'm protecting them anyway, as best I can judge from the unique point of view I am in the whole world, that I make judgments and am accountable to my own judgments about things that I do to act as a defender or protector of the weak. That's the dharma of a soldier in a very real sense, is the protection of the weak and the innocent against forces of evil, which I believe exist in the world, or at least forces that can cause harm. So in a world of thick-faced black heart, well, it turns out that being part of a tribe, so a true story circle ends up taking on the qualities of a tribe. You and your accountability partner, your spouse, your family, the people whose you've learned to trust. So in a true storytelling setting, the preconditions of truth are creating safe spaces and then learning to grow in trust so that you can tell more truths and take the stories you hear as truth so that you can act in the world and have an opportunity for transformational behavior. Thick-faced black heart. Well, what we're trying to do on this then is I'm asking for your feedback. That we got these 12 different trade-offs, and it asks you to take a position. And on the basis of that, I've answered how I think I am on my internal self. And then I've recorded how I think you see me. If the other is over here, and I know what it is that I project, I think, in my mind, right, always wrong, never right, but I can't help it, I'm a mammal. I think this is how people see me on the basis of what I've projected. What I really want to know is how you see me. Because if this is how I think you see me, if this is how I see myself, and I make decisions on what to present and how to project it, and then I think this is how you see me, I actually want to know how you see me. Now, when you tell me how you see me, let's just remember that there's how you really see me on the inside, and then there's what you choose to tell me about how you see me. What could influence that? A whole world of things. You know, does he really want the truth? He says he does, but does he mean it? Can I tell him the truth about how I feel? Do I want to hurt his feelings, or do I want to... all that shit, okay? So it goes round and around and around. What I'm genuinely saying is, I'm going to treat what you tell me as if this equals that. I'm not going to judge. I tell you this, but believe me or not, hear me now, believe me later, I guess I'd say. I'm not going to judge you as a person by as good or bad by what you tell me. I'm gonna do my best on that as a human. I can just say that, but I'm going to treat those that the only thing you can tell me is what you do tell me, and I believe it's going to be motivated by telling me the truth as you see it, and I'm going to act on that, and then I'm going to compare what you say to what I think, and I'm going to change how I think you look at me on the basis of what you actually tell me, and I'm going to act on that. I noted that there were five. Now, this is where the power of this thing actually comes in. I noticed that there was a difference between how I see myself and how I think you see me. So there was a self-awareness thing and part of this accountability, and I think there were five different ways in which what I think you see of me is different than how I see myself. One of them is, and I'm not even going to say what those are until after we do this exercise. So this is what I'd like. This is how I'd like you to do. I'm going to describe what each of those exercises are, and then what I would like you to do for yourself is how you see yourself. What I would like to hear from you is, as feedback, is how you see me, how you think I answer those questions about myself, based on what you've seen. And so the first one is, when making decisions about something important, and this is always about something important, and you can default to trading. When I'm making important decisions about trading, I make them on the basis of the things that I know or the things that I feel. So if you're primarily a thinker, you'd mark here. If you're primarily a feeler, you would think there. Then I would like you to think, how do you think I make those decisions? And then plunk that into there. So go ahead and make that. If you just number, 1 through 12, you can fill those out later. If you number 1 through 12. So on the basis of knowledge, I decide on the basis of knowledge, or I decide on the basis of how I feel about the other person and the consequences of that. So it's how those things feel. The second one, when I'm looking at the world, I am more concerned about how things are, the reality of them, the facts, or I concentrate more on the so what of it, the meaning that comes from the facts, the larger picture, the consequences. The second, I'm more about trying to make meaning, and that the details can be fuzzy. I'm not striving to be precise, I'm striving to make the meaning. Or do I care more about the facts than the reality? And then at any point, if you need to say, hey, need further explanation, let me know. Third one, I operate on the basis of, when I'm working with others, I'm really striving for clarity of understanding each other's positions, or I'm acting in a way to ensure that we have harmonious relations with each other, that I'm more concerned about being in harmony with you versus having clarity about what each of us is saying. I'm the kind of person that thrives on in orderly situations. So if I want to thrive, I try to look for things in which things are orderly. Or I'm the kind of person who does better relatively in periods of chaos, that where I create value is from chaotic situations as opposed to how well I do when things are orderly. What is my preference for the kind of situation in which I do better? Do I prefer to operate in orderly situations versus chaos? If I had a choice on how to spend my free time, I would rather be by myself reading, or I would be more attracted to traveling with a group of people that I hadn't met before to new places that I hadn't been before. Which one of those am I more likely to spend my free time on in order to gain new insights, to raise my energy? By myself in a quiet place, comfortably reading, or traveling someplace new with people that I've never met before? Number 6, I would rather spend my time concentrating on the reality of things now to get a deeper understanding of how things are in this moment, or I would rather spend my time thinking about the future and the different possibilities that might develop as a way to inform my decisions. Current realities or future possibilities. I'm the kind of person, number 7, who would rather listen more than talk. Or I'm the kind of person that would rather talk more than listen for any reason. What is my preference if I had a choice? Like if I was in a group of people, would I rather be listening more or talking more? I'm the kind of person who tries to make decisions based on structure, reasons, rules, and consistency. I'm the kind of person that prefers to have flexibility in decision making so that I can respond to context. Which one of those? Number 9, when I'm in a group situation, I find that to be an energizing environment, that I get charged up. I look forward to going into groups because of the energy that I know that it's going to give me. Or I'm the kind of person who finds being in groups tiring as I try to engage with multiple people in the correct ways. I find that tiring rather than energizing. In terms of my self-image, I see myself mostly as normal. In terms of self-image, I see myself as kind of weird compared to others. I'm more like other people than different. I'm more different than other people rather than like them most of the time. When it comes to my emotions, I'm emotionally tough, meaning that I can take a lot of adverse emotional heat and still get on with it. It doesn't wear me down. I can still remain focused on the task at hand. When it comes to emotions, my feelings get hurt easily, which changes my behavior, and there's an emotional cost that I pay when I'm dealing with adversity. I'm the kind of person, number 12, that thinks about planning ahead versus a person who prefers to improvise when it comes to engaging in the world routinely. All right. So those are the 12 trade-offs. And hopefully I've made those clear. And for your purposes, I don't need to see that unless you want to share them. Up to you. If you share them with me later, I'll take that as information as we work together to help try to craft that when A and B get together, that the deeper understanding we have about how each other sees each other might help us in the future in ways that we can only imagine, but allow us to work better together. We get to see more of each other's private self. And I'm going to trust you to tell the truth about that. What I would genuinely like to have from you, if you wish, and you're under no obligation to do that, is that if you tell me how you see me, that will give me important information about the difference between who I am and what I project to the world. As a part of my true storytelling process, I accept the fact that there's some internal part of me and that there are layers that I have accumulated over 66 years of living that I am aware of and some that I'm not aware of. And I realize that there are cultural differences and that when we're communicating, I make decisions on how to say things and how to present them on the basis of self-awareness, but trying to be as transparent and vulnerable and consistent on my external world as I am on my internal world. I know that that's not 100%, but I'm doing my best to move closer and closer all the time to tell the best truth that I can, knowing that however I send it is that you, as that person over here, is going to interpret it in ways that I trust you to do, and that you give me feedback about what I send that allows us to collaborate, cooperate, and graduate and everything and thrive together. So I promise that when you tell me how you see me, I'm going to act on that from the same basis that you're telling me the best truth that you can about how I am, and that I'm promising that I'm going to try to be a better person and take into account what you tell me about me. And part of that is I'm going to give a composite report on how multiple people see me, and I'm going to compare that to how Ken thought in his little pea brain how others saw me, and I'm going to compare the composite to my judgment about how I think you see me, and I'm going to learn something from that. Maybe I was right, probably not. But I'm also going to tell you, after you tell me how you see me, how I reported seeing myself. And I'm going to tell you in the 5 places where I think you're going to see me in a different way than I think you see me, or how I see myself. And I have been thinking hard about why that could be. And just the act of doing that gave me some important insights yesterday. And when we go into the Johari window, which I'll cover maybe next week, it turns out that the 4th quadrant, however that is one where how we really are, and neither you nor I know it. there's sort of something like this, how things really are, like some all-seeing, all-powerful. This is the shadows that are working out there that we're not even aware of, that are operating beyond our conscious ability. That if we say something like, we can only know this part, we can't even see that part. So here we are acting in the world of what we think we can know, and yet there is some deeper things moving us around that we're not even. So the Johari window brings to the surface the logical category of the things that neither one of us know about each other or ourselves, and which could actually be forces at work. What could that be like? Oh, I know. How about A is acting on B and C through Omega are out here watching these two monkeys going back and forth, and then all the rest of the world is acting on us in ways based on how they see us acting, which shapes who we are and how we see each other. Like if I listen to the propaganda about you, that shapes who I think you are. And then I act upon that knowledge, or I'm influenced by it, even if I'm not aware of it. So it turns out that that fourth quadrant is a recognition that there are other forces beyond our understanding acting on us in ways that we do not detect for our entire lifetime. Oh, our entire culture, and you can't spell culture without cult. The weight of historical culture acts upon us in ways to shape what we are even aware of as choices, and that the act of true storytelling is a deliberate attempt to pull that shit up to the surface, report on it, act on it with feedback to try to start uncovering what are the things that are making me act in this way. How did I act truthfully? Why do I think I acted that way? Why do you think I acted? And how can I start uncovering? And how can I create a wedge between the impulse to act and the action I chose to take? That may be the best thing that I can do, is to act with courage and integrity is the dharma of a warrior, which is to live an intentional life with accountability, to say, I'm trying to discover who I am and how I'm acting, and I'm doing my best, but I am going to make every effort that I can to act the way I intend to act in pursuit of these purposes based on these values, and I'm going to take full responsibility for the consequences, known and unknown. And that's what I mean by courage and integrity. That I can only do what I can do, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to be transparent as best I can about it. So part of that is what the Johari window in this exercise intend to get to. Now, I want to conclude this by saying, typically when you see this kind of trade-off decision, say, oh, what are my strengths and where are the areas, maybe not of weaknesses, but of where I'm not as skilled, and how can I do that to act in a certain way in the world so that I can get competitive advantage? If I know that I have these things and I emphasize that, I can act in a way that gets me more money, which is an entirely different motivation in some ways than the journey to self-knowledge. That's what rhetoric and communication came from. How can I use communication devices and methods in order to achieve my nefarious purposes? I want more money and I want more power, and I have no ethical constraints on how I'm going to act. And as long as my measures of effectiveness is how much power and money I have, then I'm going to do whatever it takes and say whatever it takes in order to achieve my outcomes. Well, that use of rhetoric then began to inform political theory about how people behave, and it leads you to the Prince, Machiavelli, informing guys in the warlord area of European medieval history. This is how you emphasize in your city-state power and money in the competition of warring tribes. And that if the first thing you want to do is protect you and yours, you better have power and money to do that if you want to survive. And then over in China, thick-faced Black Heart developed Confucius, but also the Warring States periods and the anyway. So when you see a world in which there is struggle and strife and violence and competition, you can see how people act in one way and they maybe believe in another way. That's sort of the foundation of all this. True storytelling is an effort to try to say, is there some other way in which we can behave towards each other and with each other? Well, let's see. Let's try that on. See what happens. So, it is my view, I've already learned so much just from myself, my inner space, and how I think you see me, that I'm genuinely interested in how you see me, so that I can make a judgment on my ability to anticipate how people take me. You know, and can I actually? The second thing is, can I be a closer representation in public to who I am in privately? That's a separate issue. And that what that means is true storytelling is concerned with ethics of how we are in the public space informed by who we are in the private space. Anyway, that's what I want to say about that. If you would be willing to just take that on and notice what comes up from you when you say, this is how I really see myself, this is how I see people. If there's a difference in that, what does that mean to you, and why do you think that is? And is that intentional? And what are you doing about that? And how does that shape the choices you make and how you communicate with others? And how you communicate with yourself? And oh, by the way, that leads to that other thing that I put on the website, which was about self-care and self-compassion. I'll tell you that when I took that, I'm not very kind and loving to myself. And if I think other people are like me, I also think that they're not very self-loving and caring about themselves. And so when I give people feedback, it's influenced by the fact that I actually think people beat themselves up more than they should. And so maybe, am I giving feedback in a way that imagines they lack self-care, and maybe I'm trying to be kind and loving with them, as opposed to telling them without concern about their feelings exactly how I think and feel. That's a real choice on how you craft your communication with others. So I'm telling you, what I want to know is how you really see me. That even if you think I am emotionally sensitive, I want you to act as if I'm emotionally tough and that I can take whatever it is that you send me and I really want to know. That's what I say. But I'm on the inside, I might very well be a 12-year-old child whose feelings get hurt so much that my entire adult life has been spent in protecting myself and who I truly am so that I don't get hurt. Or maybe I behave in public and professional circumstances in a way that has required me to be emotionally tough in order to continue to make the judgments about the lives of others that I've had to make. And that maybe has changed who I am on the inside. Or is it the case that I have a professional set of thick skin that allows me to make judgments that affect the lives of others, and it tears me up on the inside, but I still am able to do my duty? That's hard stuff. So Do you think I'm a person who is primarily sensitive or primarily tough? I've just tried to give you food for thought that would allow you to go either way on that. So, at my root, at my core, how is it that you see me? Yeah, if you, what I would say is if you just save, I saved it as a text or as an image file, and I think the best way to do it is save that and then mark it up. I I could send you this. I'll try to find the and load it on Patreon. But what I thought was easier would be just to save that as an image with Snagit and then mark it up. And I would genuinely, I think this is so important that I spent probably 2 hours on it last night in what started off as a 5-minute exercise and added it as a psychological lesson in the foundations course. I think it's that important when it comes to excavating our inner space. And I'm just going to tell you that when I look at this and I pair it with the self-care thing, take that self-care link that's on the Patreon and think about what that says about these dimensions that you see there. And when I showed you what my numbers were on that in that Patreon posting from last night, that I am not very good at self-care. And so that means I have, in order to survive in the world, I've developed coping strategies of what to do with my harsh self-judgments, which have led me to certain biases and behaviors that have affected me in powerful ways in my my external life. And if we're going to be, the research that I've done on these kinds of trade-off decisions, I actually do this in a slightly different way than the force choice in the professional setting. I actually say, in a perfect world, in the unicorn world of perfect balance, I have found a way to perfectly harmonize the part of me that is concerned with knowledge and the part of me that is with empathy. But no, a part of me leans slightly more towards knowledge or decisively towards knowledge or decisively towards knowledge in such a way that I hardly even care. So there's really multiple positions about how far on this extremity that I actually lean. So I actually have this conversation with my leaders in the following way. I'm not going to ask you to do that. I just want to know where the first choice makes you lean one way or the other, because there's some utility. But the advanced version of this says, like I tell them, when we have a written lesson plan, sir, for a lesson where I'm teaching others, is that an order to make me teach it that way, or is it a brochure? Is it simply one way that I might teach it, or I'm free to teach it any way I think the lesson should be taught? How much flexibility and freedom as a teacher of others are you giving me, the teacher? And he needs to answer that for me, because he is ultimately responsible as the commander for the output of our school, which is the skill and the training of those officers. So he's given me a mission to teach them in a certain way, and he's approved the lesson and the focus and the effort, and we've designed a lesson plan that should get us there. And so when I'm handed a lesson plan, I want to know what he thinks about that lesson plan. Do I have the flexibility to teach the way I want to teach based on 25 years of experience and 24 years in the classroom? Or does he expect me to teach it exactly as it was written? I think I make a decision on how I'm going to teach. and I'm going to live with the consequences, but I'd like to know what he thinks I'm doing, because he's going to make policy decisions on how he thinks I interpret what he says. So I want him, it pushes him to define how much flexibility he is actually giving me. How much does he trust my judgment to teach in the way that I think it should be taught? So this turns out to be a really powerful tool for people working together on important systems. So I offer you that tool. I wanted to say all those things. And I'm sorry that it took